And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Group and DHL Trade. African SMEs are now closer to global markets. Good evening. Welcome to the program. I'm Stephen Grootes. 9 minutes now after 6 the time. News in the last 2 hours or so that the Democratic Alliance has now removed Mark Burke from his finance positions in the party. He won't be speaking, I presume, on behalf of the party for a little while on those issues either. And that's after, and you heard the conversation earlier in the week, Business Day revealed the judgment that had gone against the company that he founded. It's called Castello. They're essentially, they were engaging in trading that saw US dollars leaving South Africa and coming back as rands. That's broken the law, the way in which it was done, according to the Reserve Bank. They've seized the money, etc., etc., etc. And the pressure, I suspect, telling on the DA after a bit of a series of things that have been problematic for them over the last 6 months or so. So, yeah, interesting just to see how that sort of pans out, but interesting to see that action coming just a day after the DA seemed to stand right behind him. So I'm not sure what changed. I know there was a meeting of their federal council today. I'm sure that the leader, Jordan Hill-Lewis, might have got involved, but yesterday it looked like the DA was behind him. Today, well, looks very, very different. In a moment, we'll speak to Niël Pretorius, the CEO at DRDGOLD. Really an unbelievable year for them, mainly, of course, because of higher gold prices. But they've also been able to increase production, various things happening there, investing big time over the next 3 years, which I think tells you what they think about gold prices. And Nhlanhla Nene, the finance minister twice, of course, and you'll remember what happened the first time when he was removed so suddenly by then President Jacob Zuma. I remember the night so well. It was Wednesday. It was December 2015, excuse me. And so much flowed from that as a result. Well, he's now going to be the chair of the Financial and Fiscal Commission. We'll talk to him about his new role. We'll talk also to Kevin Lings about inflation figures, 4.3% for July, lower than anyone really expected, and one or two other issues coming up as well. Good to hear from you this evening, 011-883-0702 and 021-446-0567. Your view on whether the DA's done the right thing, the wrong thing with Mark Burke? Do you think this has changed the way you understand our politics and our political parties? There's no allegation of criminality, by the way. Contravention of foreign exchange regulations was sort of seen in a slightly different category. But your thoughts, please, on 072-702-1702. It's 11 minutes after 6.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app
and DSTV channel 856.
Well, higher gold prices leading to a knockout year for DRDGOLD. Headline earnings up 89%, operating profits up 83%. Able to slightly increase the amount of gold they sold as well. Niël Pretorius is the CEO at DRDGOLD. Niël, good evening. I mean, a very strong set of results for you. Higher gold price is one of the reasons. You were also able to produce more gold than you expected. How were you able to do that?
Stephen, hi, good evening, and thank you for having me on the show. It's a combination of two things. The one is that our head grades were marginally higher than what we had anticipated, and that's because of the blend. And then our plants were operating higher than what we expected the recovery factors were going to be, or the plant efficiency numbers were going to be. Now, it can turn in the opposite direction as well, because you can't just think out gold. It's got to be there in order to take it out. So it is something that one needs to track quite closely. But the main actor was the fact that our grades were marginally higher than what we had anticipated at the start of the year.
You've been able to manage your operating costs quite nicely as well. You're running at full capacity. You're getting higher grades than you expect. How tough is it to keep operating costs down when you're doing all of those things?
Well, a big impact this year in terms of operating costs was the fact that it was the first full year of our solar plant that takes care of about 50% of the power requirements of the Ergo plant, which is the largest throughput plant that we have. It was its first full year in production. We were also able to wheel quite a lot of power into the grid and then draw that power at the other operation on the other side of town in Fourchville, the Far West Gold Recovery. So power was a big factor. We've also, our relationships with many of our suppliers come over many, many years, and we pay them on time. So we're also in a position to negotiate favorable rates, competitive rates. And I must say, the business has been set up well, and it's being managed by a technical team that understands the business well. They know where to save and where not to waste money. And they do run a tight ship. So it's a combination of discipline and a number of other factors. What makes it particularly pleasing is that the diesel price, obviously the oil price, shot up. And we managed to maintain relatively modest increases in total cost, despite the fact that there was a very significant increase in diesel cost.
So you were able to do all of these things, electricity having that big an impact on you. I mean, you, like most mines, most big industry, are going to invest more and more in their own power.
We are, and in fact, we have another project lined up. So at the moment, we've got a 60-megawatt solar farm. This year, our total consumption from our solar plant was 148 gigawatt. That was the total contribution into our power consumption out of a total of 330 gigawatt for the entire group. We've got another 30 megawatt hour facility lined up, which will hopefully kick in about 2 years from now. It's one that was designed by our team, but then we on-sold it to an operator working out of Cape Town, and they're building this facility now. So that will hopefully continue to contribute. But I mean, if you drive down towards Bloemfontein along the N1, and if you take the Welkom Road, for example, there are these solar farms that's sort of rising up all over the place. So the power supply construct in South Africa is definitely changing very, very significantly.
You measure various things. You measure the amount of water that you use a little bit less water. You measure dust quite carefully, and you were able to reduce your total dust exceedances. I mean, that must require intense discipline to keep dust down in your environment.
It's a 20-year program. I remember in 2007 when we first started budgeting towards this. Remember, our facilities, our tailings dams, places where we reclaim materials, it's all right there where people live. And geospatially, it's also, by design, it's unfortunately also so that the disenfranchised are the ones who live closest to our facilities, and this is a legacy thing. So 20 years ago, I remember a very specific request for capital to start vegetating some of these dumps and start managing these dust levels because of the impact that it was having on the quality of life of our surrounding communities. And I mean, you cannot stand indifferent to that because you cannot operate in a hostile environment. So very much part of our our sustainable development focus as well, which is important. It's an important consideration for us. And so after 20 years, most of our facilities have been extensively cladded and vegetated, and the amount of dust coming off those is compared to where it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it's chalk and cheese. In fact, in the first, I remember that we've been paying dividends now for 19 years, which you would have noticed. I remember in the first 10 years of paying dividends that the cost of actually vegetating these dumps on an ongoing basis, which wasn't a requirement at the time, but something that we decided that we were going to do nonetheless in order to sort of manage exposure over time and start reducing that rehabilitation exposure. We spend more money on that than what we actually paid out in dividends at the time. And it's become very much part of our operating cost profile.
You're expanding your capacity, Vision 2028, you call it. Are you expecting gold prices then to support that expansion for some time? I mean, you're taking a 3-year punt, well, longer really, on gold prices.
Absolutely. Look, we've always taken full exposure, at least for the last 20 years. Again, we've taken full exposure to the gold price because we do believe that a big part of the value proposition offered by a gold producer is gold volatility, and people trade gold shares. They hold on to those that pay dividends, but they also trade it depending on where the cycle is. So the investments that we're making are very much designed to fully optimize our existing ore body. So it will bring about a 40% increase in throughput, organic increase in throughput, which is important, we believe. Rather, sort of you leverage your existing infrastructure than going buying new assets far away. And it will extend the life of mine of our operations to add about another 20 years to both of those operations. So these were essential investments to make if we wanted to avoid starting to significantly scale down volume throughput. So it was a requirement if we wanted to optimize our ore body. But it's also, we're doing it in a climate which we believe is favorable. Obviously, it's also happening at a time now where the gold price is really helping us. So it's 10 billion rand over 4 years, and we're sort of halfway through that. And we thought we were going to be in debt, and we're not. In fact, we ended the financial year with 2.7 billion rand in cash, which inform the dividend that we pay, just over R1 billion, so or that we are paying. So it's a good time to be doing this. And yes, to your answer, maybe a more direct response to your answer, I think the fundamentals for gold are favorable. I think there are finally some sort of a counter dynamic in the global world gold market, in the sense that it's not only when the West likes or dislikes gold that the gold price moves. There's definitely some accumulation taking place of gold in various jurisdictions as a countermeasure to dollar weakness, and that's definitely been supportive of the gold price. We've seen gold rebase consistently over a period of time, the last 4 or 5 years, consistently rebase at higher levels than in the past. So we do believe the fundamentals are strong for gold.
Thank you very much indeed. Niël Pretorius is the CEO at DRDGOLD. Yeah, obviously an incredibly strong year for them. 19 minutes after 6.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes
on 702.
702.
Confirmation over the last 24 hours or so, and Nhlanhla Nene, the former finance minister, will be the new chair of the Finance and Fiscal Commission. The commission gives advice and recommendations to Parliament and to provincial legislatures and local councils. Well, I'm pleased to tell you that Nhlanhla Nene has agreed to speak to you this evening. Mr. Nene, good evening, and thank you for your time. You have a lot of experience in government, in Parliament as well, a deputy minister, a minister. How do you see the role of the Finance and Fiscal Commission? What do you believe it should be doing, particularly in quite a difficult financial environment?
Thanks, Stephen, and thanks for inviting me. And I indicated earlier that I actually haven't even set foot in the office yet, but I agreed to talk to you because as I recover from, feeling betrayed, because I thought I was cruising very nicely to my retirement. And here I am, and I can confess now that maybe when last I spoke to you, I said never again. Now I've learned the hard way that never say never. But I must say that this is a very critical constitutional structure in our fiscal environment. And I think it's for my sins, as you have indicated, having served in a number of structures that were responsible for managing finances from the time when I chaired the budget committee, the structure that today gave birth to what is called the Appropriations Committee, having served in the Finance Committee, but also having served in the ministry. I do have a little bit to offer in terms of strengthening institutions of this nature. And I think what's going to be critical here is I think there's some work that has begun already between the structures that are managing the finances. Since we are, the Financial and Fiscal Commission gives advice with regards to the equitable allocation of resources to the various structures, but advise in Parliament also. And I guess with all of those structures in place and all of the legislative framework that is in place, we do need to navigate that with utmost care and ensure that the resources, especially during these difficult times, are able to be allocated appropriately, but also spent appropriately.
I realize you won't give us any indication of your views on things that might come before you, but the National Treasury has been obviously trying to rein in spending. We're paying back more of our debt. We've had 1 or 2 ratings upgrades as a result. Let me put the question to you differently. Are you quite pleased with the course that things have been going on? I mean, it seems that we've been able to manage our money quite nicely over the last year or two. Certainly, we seem to be making progress in 1 or 2 big important issues.
Indeed, as I was witnessing as an ordinary citizen, the fact that we were able to pull back, the country was able to pull back from the grey listing, it means that we did some things very, very, very correctly. Operation Nhlanhla is one of those also that, in my view, and I've just followed a bit of it, it shows that we are on the right path with the presidency working with the Treasury, but also with the various spheres of government from national to right up to local government. So there is the foundations have been put in place, and I think all we need to do is to make sure that they work. But also, one of the things that I think we should, whilst we have anchors, and monetary policy has got its anchor in inflation targeting. I think fiscal policy requires an anchor as well, so as to be able to, hold our financial expenditure mainly under check all the time.
So you would suggest a fiscal anchor is a good idea. I mean, there's been a lot of debate about it. I think it's also becoming more and more important when you consider the position we're in and where we don't want to go.
Absolutely, because even though the anchor itself does not achieve that, but it actually serves as a guideline that actually you work towards achieving a particular objective rather than spending without boundaries.
Nhlanhla Nene, sir, thank you very much indeed for your time. Really do appreciate it. The incoming chair of the Finance and Fiscal Commission, obviously not quite in office yet, but agreeing to speak to us in general terms about the role of the organisation this evening. And you'll remember, of course, the long track record, the contribution he's made to government. I, for one, am glad to see that the contribution continues. Retirement will just have to wait just a little bit. 24 minutes now after 6.
The Money Show.
The markets.
Chris Stewart's portfolio manager at 91. Chris, good evening. Well, obviously very strong results from DRD Gold.
Yes, good evening, Stephen. I think DRD Gold would have struggled not to go up today, given the movements in the gold price and some of the news we've seen out of the US. Nonetheless, it was a strong set of results, earnings up almost 90%. And, apart from the fact that they were obviously supported by a considerably higher gold price over the period, it was also solid operational delivery. I think they had guided the market to their actual production levels, which was above the top end of previous guidance. Also, cash costs coming in below guidance, very strong free cash flow, a debt-free balance sheet, plenty of opportunities for expansion, and reasonably solid guidance in terms of production for the year ahead, with decent increases in production. With the gold price going up today quite handsomely, the share reacted very positively indeed.
Local inflation data, a surprise on the downside. Nice surprise in these times. Obviously, though, I mean, you look at oil prices; they've been above $90 for some time now.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking in the rearview mirror, the CPI data today is good, 4.3% on headline CPI versus about 4.5% expected. And that's despite the impact of municipal rates, electricity tariffs and water tariffs coming in for the month, with transport inflation adding a benefit on the inflation line for this particular month as fuel prices were down. But as you point out, it's really the forward look that adds the uncertainty. Where do energy prices go from here? And, notwithstanding the fact that the rand is strong at 16.10 to the dollar, given where spot oil prices are, it's conceivable that we can get some, reasonably chunky fuel price increases again next month, which then upsets the apple cart. But outside of fuel, inflation behaving pretty well. It's good to see both goods and services inflation coming down, month on month. And indeed, food inflation also behaving pretty well at the moment.
We saw a big spike in longer-term bond yields, the US 30-year bond yesterday. Now it looks like they're intervening. They're going to boost buybacks of that. I mean, is there cause for concern here? It is a big yield, it's a high number.
Yeah, I mean, that's what got the market going today. But concerns expressed by U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent that he was going to, only 2 weeks after they released their planned schedule for bond buybacks this quarter, the Treasury Department of the U.S. said that they would be increasing by at least double the size of their purchases at the long end of the U.S. curve. They've been quite concerned about the blow-off in rates at the long end of the U.S. curve, and as a result of that, they're going to try and intervene, buy at that end, increase the price of the bonds and thereby depress yields at the long end of the U.S. curve, which is obviously very, very important for long-term borrowing costs in the U.S. and also a very important signal for equity markets because that is typically sets the discount rate that investors will use to value stocks on the market. So that got bond yields rallying at the long end of the US. It got the dollar selling off quite sharply, and it really got the gold and platinum price going, and that's what drove our market up, I think, 2% odd by the close today, and that, in fact, 2.4% on the all-share index at the close. And you only have to look, DRD Gold up 12, Impala Platinum up 9, Sibanye-Stillwater up 9, Anglo Gold, despite going ex-dividend, up 8, Northern Platinum up 8. It's the platinum and gold stocks, the precious metal stocks that really, really got the market going today, and a very, very strong day for the JSE as a result.
Chris Stewart, thanks so much. Portfolio manager at 91, 10 seconds after 6:30.
WhatsApp Stephen
On 072
702
1702.
We'll talk inflation in just a moment. 23 minutes now to 7 the time. Also, of course, looking at the impact of that on you. Been fascinated to watch what's been happening in the Democratic Alliance with the Mark Burke saga, partly because of the really quite quick about turn yesterday, backing him today, removing him, but also because of what it tells us about what happens in foreign exchange markets and crypto arbitrage trading, basically where you trade off different rates in different places. And I'm unbelievably oversimplifying a very complex thing. I don't know if you've ever dabbled in that. I have to tell you, I haven't. But if you have a deeper understanding of how this works, why it works, how people make money out of it, I'd really appreciate that. I know we talk about crypto and that sort of world quite often, but we don't go into it too deeply for various reasons. But I'd really enjoy hearing from you on that on 072-702-1702. 22 minutes now to 7.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Group and DHL Go Trade. African SMEs are now closer to global markets.
17 minutes now to 7 the time. Good to hear what's happening in your sort of food price world. Suggestions that the lowest food price inflation since 2010, since the World Cup being hosted here, has had a big impact on today's inflation figure. You might want to let us know if it's having an impact on you at all. On 072-702-1702. So inflation slower than expected. Stats SA saying inflation for the month of July dropping from 5% in June to 4.3% in July. There was a drop in fuel prices too. Kevin Lings is the chief economist at Stand-Up. Kevin, good evening. Good to chat again. Does this suggest the Reserve Bank was right with that hold a few weeks ago?
I knew you were going to start with that, Stephen, this evening. It certainly plays to their decision to leave rates unchanged. And obviously, it does put them now in a position where they can continue to adopt a wait-and-see approach. I think the risk to interest rates is still to the upside, even though this number was a lot better than expected, because we've got two big factors we still don't know. The one is the pending fuel price increase in September, which at this stage looks substantial, and we kind of only halfway through the month, and it may get worse during the second half of the month. And then we've got the El Nino weather effect that we're not sure how that's going to play out in terms of disruptive weather patterns and then potentially push food prices higher. So I think the Reserve Bank will be vigilant about that. They certainly wouldn't want to send out a message that they're very comfortable. So I think they'll message that the risk to interest rates is to the upside, the risk to inflation is to the upside. But I must say, looking through this month's data, there isn't really a lot of evidence of second round effects, which is what the Reserve Bank would always be vigilant about. Yes, if you look at taxi fares, those have gone up, but there's not a lot, so therefore not a lot to be concerned about. And as you say, food inflation sits at 0.6%. That's incredible. It went down in the month, and we were warned about fertilizer price increases, and that just hasn't shown up in the food prices. We were warned about additional costs for farmers through using tractors, etc. That hasn't shown up in the food prices. So with food inflation at 0.6, it helps enormously to keep the overall inflation rate quite low.
I mean, the obvious problem, of course, is that oil prices are still now above $90 a barrel.
That's right. So we're looking at a very sizable increase in both diesel and petrol, a bit more pronounced again in diesel. And then again, you've got that added risk that all of these price increases, while they're not yet showing up in second round effects, if we keep having further fuel price adjustments, will it eventually be passed on? And so that's going to remain a concern for the Reserve Bank. And so they've got to put out that message. And I think from their perspective, because the target is now 3%, yes, inflation came down to 4.3, but it's still quite a bit away from the target. You know, they've got a 3% target with a 1% leeway either side. So at 4.3, they're outside of that 1% leeway. We do feel that inflation is going to move up over the next couple of months, so they're going to get further away from their target. And the risk is that the longer it stays at that level, it becomes more entrenched in wage negotiations, inflation expectations, etc. So yes, this number was good. Undoubtedly, there aren't second-round effects, but they can't send out a soft message about interest rates and inflation just yet.
I mean, the issue is, obviously, we can see from what's happening in the Middle East, I cannot see there are more and more actors getting involved. I cannot see an end to it soon. I cannot see the Strait of Hormuz being open soon. Oil's, I mean, lots of people suggesting oil's likely to stay at $90 for a lot longer. Let's hope sort of there rather than higher. If we have another year of this, surely that leads to a much higher inflation rate over time, because the second round effects, do they accumulate?
Yes, so they will accumulate. So as you absorb, a company can absorb part of the price increases, and there is actually a tendency for many companies through an initial price shock to not automatically pass that on, so to try and cushion the effect. But the longer it's in place, the more sustained the price hikes are. Eventually, some of that has to move through into the broader economy. And so that's what you would anticipate if the crisis drags on for months and months. And I agree with you. It's hard to see how you get the resolution now. And it does appear that both sides are waiting for the other one to capitulate, and it doesn't feel like either side will. So it's very possible that through to the end of the year, we end up with an oil price that is similar to this. We do know that if there is an opening of the strait, and if there is a normalization of oil transport, then we think oil prices will come down quite quickly. $70 is entirely feasible. But in the absence of that resolution, it's going to remain around these levels. And as a result, we're going to pay quite a lot more over the next couple of months. And then we go into wage negotiations time for South Africa with an inflation rate elevated. And obviously then we've got the end of the year season where some of these price effects may become much more noticeable. So, as I say, this is a good month's number, but a lot of risk ahead.
All of that must mean then that the Reserve Bank, in keeping with what you suggest about signals it has to send, may not be able to afford a hold in September.
Well, so if you go back, so we thought they would hike rates at the last meeting, 25 basis points. And they didn't. And if you remember, inflation went to 5%. And it felt to us that at 5%, that number that came out was way above expectations, and it suggested a lot of risks. And the Reserve Bank chose to keep rates on hold. And at the time, that was difficult to actually determine why they made that decision. With inflation now down at 4.3, surprising on the downside. Well, if you're keeping your interest rates on hold at 5%, why would you not keep them on hold at 4.3? So logically, and given that there aren't second-round effects yet, they can probably afford a further round of wait and see, and then message accordingly. I think the other thing that's helping, Stephen, is that when you look around the world, there are actually very few central banks that are increasing interest rates in a meaningful way. That doesn't mean there aren't any. The ECB has, Bank of England has, but all the major other central banks, if you look at Bank of England, you look at the Federal Reserve, they haven't increased. Bank of Canada hasn't increased. A lot of countries have simply kept rates on hold through this whole phase. And in a way, that does help us a little bit. And the reason is similar to us. There isn't really evidence of second round effects. And so you do get a sense that there's a bit more reluctance internationally to simply move interest rates automatically a lot higher. And the Reserve Bank will be very mindful of that. So I guess, they could adopt a wait and see still.
Kevin Lings, thank you so much. Really do appreciate it. The chief economist at Stanlib with the Money Show, 9 minutes now to 7. Well, let's probe the food inflation issue a little more deeply. Tabile Nkunja is an agricultural economist. Tabile, good evening. Thank you. I really do appreciate the time. Why is food price inflation so low? I mean, we're talking 16-year low.
Good evening to you, Stephen, and of course, the listeners at home. Thanks for having me again. So I think as part of the general, view or what I've been commenting about for the past few months, we have seen this decline into food inflation, and this is something that, given the wars that are happening and potentially, droughts that we are talking about to come later on, they are quite, helpful for now. So basically, the main driver, or at least the main, thing that is assisting with the inflation that we are seeing for food, it has been the fact that we had quite an excellent a year production in terms of the basic foods. Except the issues were in the meat industry, which of the meat itself now is getting back to its food. There's been so much, in terms of the improvements that have been happening, but there's still way too much to be done until then. But basically for the foods like the grains, all the stuff that you get from the maize mills, there's enough wheat in South Africa and of course outside the world when we need to import it. Then the rice also is already quite okay in terms of the prices, the vegetables, and generally the food. So the good production season that we had because of the rains that we received, it did really one thing that has been the benefiting factor for the consumers in South Africa so far, and that's something that I think we can appreciate given the current economic woes that we're still facing, unemployment and so forth.
I mean, maize meal inflation is actually still negative. I mean, that must help millions of people around the country. And that must also, as you say, I mean, maize is a bit like petrol to the rest of the economy. It's sort of a multiplier. That must be playing a big role.
Yeah, so certainly, of course, when such happened, one thing that we'll talk about when the prices of the petrol goes up, you will really, immediately one of the issues that you're going to get is a lot of people, complain about how is it going to impact, their basic food, especially the folks that are still quite struggling, levels in terms of the economy or maybe even the income that they are having. But so far, those, the huge effects that you'll normally see, they have not really been trickling in to what you are saying in terms of the food. But also, so the issue is going to probably be on the value addition part of things, because you'll recall that when we are going towards March of each year, we are ending the season for the many summer grains in South Africa. So then that means there's not too much activity there. So therefore, the activities that you will see will be on the value addition and our processing. So I think for now, then, those businesses, they've been able to quite, absorb a little bit of what it has been coming in terms of what the fuel and the diesels are going to be, doing within their business. But going forward, Stephen, I want to mention it, going forward towards later this year and early next year, especially if the drought that has been, vocally said about, then we're going to begin to really see that, because even the war itself, for now, it remains quite a very fluid one. You don't know what is going to happen tomorrow and what is going to be the impact. Because as much as we are doing okay now, South Africa is a very much country deeply into what is happening elsewhere. So whatever the situation is going to be, somehow it ends up into us, not necessarily directly at times, but sometimes directly, and something that we have seen previously.
Well, I mean, this is the big issue. We're lucky that we had so much rain. It looks like we're going to need it. Is it possible to forecast how long the impact of lots of rain in the last season will help cushion us into the next season?
So another thing, Stephen, that I've been following the data that we are having on the dam levels across the country, especially those that are used for the agricultural purposes. A lot of them, they remain quite in okay levels, except in the Western Cape, where they receive winter rain. So therefore, they are still a little bit lower if it compared to the likes of Eastern Cape. The parts of Gauteng, Mpumalanga, we have seen quite a lot of flooding that really increased the levels for the dams that we had. And then, of course, the moisture itself is going to depend on how significant the drought, when it comes, Stephen, is going to be. But also remember that, for instance, the recent snows that we have seen, as much as it was cold and snowing and all that, so the moisture that sort of brought into the soil is going to somehow really assist, a little bit. But then again, how will that be? Will that be too much in terms of when we are to begin our planting in October? Because that's when then even the prices, when you have to go towards the early of each year, then the trading in our commodities tend to be, a little bit sticky there because of the demands, and then the supply is not really up there. So there's just a lot that needs to be, tracked at one time. But I think also again, need to emphasize, Stephen, the bigger players outside the world, they are still, projecting quite okay numbers in terms of what they are going to produce. So therefore, if internally in South Africa we are struggling somehow, then other players, in the east, in the hemispheres up there, they're not that easy. they will probably be able to assist and supply us with, what the grains and other basic foods that we will need that time. But as you are mentioning, it's the projection. A lot can still happen, even though for now the numbers are just pointing to a little bit, a tedious or a gray area at the moment.
Meat prices last year, obviously still the impact of the foot and mouth pandemic. That's over. Well, the effects of it, I suppose I should say. The fact that that's over, is that helping to bring meat prices or meat price inflation rather slightly lower now?
Certainly it is helping, Stephen. I mean, we even saw, quite some of the markets that have closed their borders for our meat to come into their countries because they are seeing a lot of, developments that are happening within the country, both with the government and the private sector and other stakeholders that are involved in that. So there's been so much, improvement. But as I said earlier on, Stephen, it's still quite early to say how this is going to go. Because it's still something that South Africa has never experienced into this level. So therefore, the efforts themselves, they are going to be showing a little bit of smaller progress given the fact that this has been so significant. But we are seeing some bit of, better changes in terms of the numbering, that is, of the cattle and other stock that you supply the market. So therefore, that is really helping. That's why the numbers on the retails are seeing and the wholesalers that they are reflecting those kind of small progression there, which is something for now we appreciate, especially even the exports themselves that are being opened up a little bit.
Tabile Nkunjana, thanks so much. Really do appreciate it. The agricultural economist.
And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Group and DHL Go Trade. African SMEs are now closer to global markets. Lots coming up in the next little while. The study of demography, you could argue the study of the future. We'll talk about that and China with Graham Codrington. He's actually in the studio facing me now, so I predict we'll be talking to him in just a moment. Other predictions, Wendy Nola's been looking at another bank scam. Oh, how often, people phone you. Do they want to talk to you about your bank? Yes, go away. And I'm being polite. Surely can be the only thing that you can say now. I mean, that's just where we are. It's such a major issue. And then your shapeshifter this evening, Nomvoyiso Bati, the CEO of the Association of Comms and Technology, worked in the private sector in communications, including here. She worked as well as a regulator at ICASA, adjudicating complaints at one point, and she's worked in government. I don't know many people who've done all three of those things. So I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation. Your shapeshifter this evening from 7:30. Good to hear from you tonight. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567. And voice notes, please, on 072 702 1702. 8 minutes after 7.
The Money Show.
Business Unusual.
Well, demography really is the future. If you know how many people are being born, you'll know all sorts of things about school years. You'll know how big they'll be, whether you should be a marriage photographer now or in 18 years' time, all sorts of questions like that. And Graham Codrington, the lead researcher at Tomorrow Today Futures Institute, he's been looking at it. Graham, in particular, China. And I mean, China, it feels far away sometimes, but economically it's incredibly close, and their demography is changing very, very quickly.
Yeah, so many people, especially business people in South Africa, keep an eye on the US, they keep an eye on Europe, and China almost feels like the Far East, as we used to call it, this sort of sleeping dragon that you don't wake up. But it is waking up in the sense that it's looking globally. It wants to play on the global stage. And so we need to look at China and understand it a bit more. And I was looking at some of the demographics in China, and there's just one standout fact that's astounding. Because of the one-child policy, I think most people would know that back in the 1970s and 80s, that just a lot of the leadership of China thought there's just too many people there, and so they limited, and of course that's the upside of their style of government, is you can make these policies and impose them, and they just said families can have one child. And then from the 1980s, they gave those families permission to terminate pregnancies if it wasn't the child they were looking for, and that's a nice way.
If it wasn't a boy.
That's a nice way to say if it wasn't a boy, right? And as it happens, around about 33 million Chinese families decided to have a boy instead of a girl. Well, no, there's probably more than that, but there are 33 million more young men now in China than there are young women. And that's a big ratio difference. And so now you have to think, you mentioned wedding photographers. I mean, who do you marry? If, it's you and 33 other million men chasing one woman, as it happens.
I mean, this impacts not just China, but other parts of the world as well. I mean, men are going to look for a life partner. Many of them are going to look for a female life partner. This is, one of the big drivers of humanity.
Well, so this is where, as you say, demography does in fact become one of the biggest tools we have in the future prediction game, because it is probably the only statistic we can say comes with an actual forecast and a prediction. If we know how many kids are born this year, we can extrapolate over their lifetime. So this is not going away. They can't create 18-year-old Chinese women to fill the gap. So what happens? Some sociologists are concerned in many countries around the world, if you have more young men, you have more violence.
Yeah.
It's just a common concern and a well-known fact. So does that happen?
In Europe, it's actually the biggest variable for rates of violent crime is your percentage of young men between 18 and 25.
Yeah. And then if unemployment begins to rise in that group, then it just goes off the charts. We've got to be careful. We're talking about somebody else's culture, but if there is now this difference between men and women, and therefore maybe, let's call it fighting over women, does that translate into gender-based violence at any stage? But the upside that the Chinese would be looking for is, well, if you can't get married and you just accept that, well, then you might become a workaholic. As a single young man, you're saving your money, but of course you're then creating a generational cycle, because you're not getting married, you're not having children. You are spending your money in ways that other people haven't done before. So this could see a really significant shift in the Chinese economy. Then that rolls out to the rest of the world. So does China then start to go and look for wives in other parts of the world? And I'm not saying in any bad way, but just looking for that. But then does that change? For example, let's look at South Africa, tourism. So if you're in the tourism industry, you think China might be a future market. Do you have single rooms? Do you have something that's attractive to a young single man rather than a family or an older generation or a couple? And so I think that we can keep our eyes on this, especially in South Africa. It does impact us.
And if I were an American military planner, I would know that they will have a very big pool of young men as potential soldiers. And the military would be perhaps quite an attractive option. If you can't get married and start a family, maybe you'd be in the military for a long time. All sorts of things come from this.
It does. And I suppose what we then need to be doing, and this is, you can't predict the future in any way, but you can begin to look at these trends. And I think with quite a level of certainty, begin to say, well, what are the knock-on effects? And interestingly, in many manufacturing type environments in not only China, but in South Korea, Vietnam, it's actually women who are more sought after.
Yeah.
Not just in clothing and the things you might think, but actually in some of those high-tech environments, women are, for making chips and so on. So does China fill that gap with more robotics? Yes, that will be part of the answer. But does China then look at Africa and say, well, let's take some of those factories and put them on a continent where there, in fact, are lots of young people and maybe more women as well. And so for me, this is a fascinating, just a single data point out of China opens up a lot of thoughts for the future.
We're in an era where lots of countries are worried, and so they do dramatic things, often in the short term. And that's exactly what China did. And now look, I mean, isn't there a lesson there for everyone?
Well, I did think, Stephen, as I began to just take a read through the various South African political parties' manifestos for the upcoming election.
That'll be cheerful reading.
Yeah, I'm drudging through it, but I did wonder whether some of the things we're seeing in some of those manifestos, like, for example, just an example, privatizing water companies, for example, in the short term, you think, oh, this might solve our problem in the next 5 years. Does it create a massive problem? Ask anyone who lives in England and the state of their rivers and tap water, whether a government policy of nationalisation of key resources is a good one. But maybe I'm just being a bit cheeky at this time on a Wednesday evening to say that.
So you should be. Graham Codrington, thank you, the lead researcher at Tomorrow Today Futures Institute, the power of demography in predicting the future. 16 minutes after 7.
The Money Show.
Consumer Ninja.
18 minutes after 7. Well, Wendy Knowles has been looking once again as your consumer ninja at fraud issues and how many times people get taken in. So the South African Banking Risk Information System Centre, looking at its numbers from 2025, 2.41 billion rand was lost to digital banking crime last year. The South African Fraud Prevention Service in its annual report says that total fraud, so this is the value of fraud that its members stopped before the money moved, was 7.44 billion. So 2.4 billion rand was taken. Nearly 7.5 billion was nearly taken, if you see what I mean. Stopped at the last minute. All right, Wendy Knowles, good evening. That figure of 2.41 billion rand that was stolen, how did this happen?
Hi, Stephen. Okay, so it's such a big number, most of us can't even begin to get our heads around it. But the context is important. So in 2023, that figure, and again, it's the amount lost by bank customers due to digital banking crime, was 1.09 billion. In 2024, that had jumped to 1.86 billion, and now it's sitting at 2.41 billion. So in effect, it's the amount lost has doubled, more than doubled in 2 years. And that's the story. And the number of cases, actual people in this story went from 52,500 people in 2023 to 110, just over 110,000 last year. So imagine the misery, Stephen. And that works out to just over 300 South Africans a day, at roughly 6.6 million rand a day. And then just interestingly, because, you know, we jokingly say you need money. Oh, I'll have to rob a bank. Well, as a joke, last year, 2025, guess how many bank robberies there were?
I don't know.
2, as in 1, 2 in the whole country for an entire year. It was 8 in 2024. The total taken that way was 630,000 rand compared to 110,000 digital banking crimes. So the point is, we're not talking getaway cars and all the stuff we see in movies anymore. To get into your bank account, they need your phone number. They need some banking info about you, which we've had so many data breaches, they can get it that way. Which bank you're with, what accounts you have, etc. And they need about 20 minutes of your time on the phone. And if you aren't, as thousands of people clearly aren't, there goes your money.
So they call it vishing. What is vishing?
Okay, it's voice phishing. So it's when they socially engineer you, trick you, scam you over the phone. So the banks have got the security quite locked, and so what they have to do, they can get your bank account number, they can get whatever from the dark web through the breaches, but they can't get your one-time pins unless you help them. And so they phone you, and they will tell you in most cases they are from the fraud department of your bank, and they've seen some dodgy transactions. They'll say, oh, we've got some money going to some betting company, for example. Was that you? No, and now you're in a bit of a panic. Okay, right, no problem. We're going to just talk you through this. And they say, you'll get this SMS from your bank, from us, your bank, and they don't talk about one-time pins because people kind of have got the sense you mustn't share your one-time pin. So they'll say there's a 4-digit number. We just need that to block the account or stop the transaction or whatever. And it happens, and a lot of it is older people who are much more comfortable talking to strangers on the phone about their accounts, but younger people too. And one actually posted a video on TikTok that I saw just yesterday saying, I'm so embarrassed, I feel so stupid, but I want to share this because I want to help other people.
So this is just a short flavor of how Diana put it and explained her story on TikTok this week.
get a call yesterday from someone claiming to be from the fraud department at Time Bank, and basically that they have detected fraudulent activity on my account. And they proceeded to ask me some questions. Obviously, naturally, when you hear those words as an introduction to the call, I went straight into panic. And of course, I'm willing to participate, to do whatever needs to be done to stop what's happening. The guy says to me, okay, well, we can see some payments going off from there, and it was flagged as fraud. So anyway, he proceeds to say, okay, so we need your authorization to stop and reverse these transactions before it continues. So he says, you're going to get an SMS now from Time Bank saying that your account has been blocked. And sure as hell, bling, my phone goes off and there's the SMS that my account has been blocked. Then he says, okay, so now you are going to read that SMS, read the OTP, the 4-digit number in that SMS back to me. And I mean, in my mind, I kind of, that OTPs should never be shared, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, this is a matter of urgency, and this is the bank asking me for it, so surely it's legit.
I mean, that's how Diana puts it. And Wendy, it's so scary, they get you worried, they get you nervous. How did she know then that she'd been scammed?
Because they're actually, what they did was, and they got her to authorize it. They even at one point made her, she did face recognition. She put her camera on, let them see her face. They locked her out of her own account. They delinked, and she approved it. They delinked her own phone and put theirs on. They told her it was the other way around. It was this Samsung. We've got to get that Samsung off. And she wasn't reading the information on the SMSs until afterwards. So she was just in a panic looking for the 4 numbers and giving them and not realizing what she was approving. So they delinked her phone, blocked her out of her account, got her to approve a new password, and then she couldn't get back in, obviously, and she knew something was terribly wrong. And when she phoned her bank, they essentially said, well, we can't help you because she must have authenticated and given her face, and there was so many SMSs, at least 6 times, I would say. And the beauty of, not the beauty, but we indebted to her because I've spoken to a lot of people, older people who have lost a lot of money. And they're panicked, they're ashamed, and they don't have as clear a recall of what they did, how these people led them by the nose into their bank accounts. And Diana remembered, and that's why I think it's so brave and so wonderful of her in the midst of her trauma. She lost everything that was in her account. For her to post this video and say, I want, please, people listen to me, don't do what I did, kind of thing. So, interestingly, we look across the pond at the European Economic Area, manipulating the payer accounted for more than half the value of fraudulent credit transfers in 2024, and the payment users carried about 85% of those losses. In the UK, they call it authorized push payment fraud, rose 19% to €576. The difference is that the UK made reimbursement mandatory. Imagine. So you just get your losses, and we're a long way from that here. The most you can hope for is that you get offered a goodwill of 10% or 20% maybe of your losses, but you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, so you don't talk to the media, you don't post on TikTok, and all the rest. It's okay. A bit
so what's
awkward.
So what's the industry doing about this? I mean, they obviously will be very nervous about it. It affects them in all sorts of ways too.
Of course. So they've set up a banking industry anti-scam center, BIASC, but clumsy, to trace and freeze money quickly before it is moved on through those mule accounts at Fabric. The report says that it's not operating at the scale, coverage, or level of automation required to materially reduce overall losses. So there's a lot of scope for improvement there. I was at a NFO banking conference in Johannesburg on Friday, and a Capitec representative was saying how they are using technology, AI included, to pick up unusual activity on customers' accounts and therefore stopping the transaction. So somebody who's never placed a gambling bet, or, suddenly wanting, to move 50,000 Rand to Hollywood Bets or whatever, that kind of thing would be flagged. and they're having huge success with that. So I'm going to be pressing the other banks about that. What are they doing to use the technology to get ahead of the scammers? Yeah.
And what do you need to know? I mean, what do you if you know this, you'll be okay.
Okay. So 99.9% of the time, if someone says they're from your bank's fraud department and there's some transactions that are dodgy going through your account and they need your help to stop it, that is fraud. Those are actually the scammers. In the call, do not engage. And if you want peace of mind, phone your bank's fraud department, having saved the legitimate number in your contacts beforehand, like now if it's not there already. And I can tell you that in 99.9% of the cases, they'll say, no, that wasn't us. Your accounts are absolutely fine. So just end the call. Just say goodbye, as Marty van Skalkwijk of the Fraud Prevention Service says. Do not engage these people. No matter how panicked they make you feel, end the call and phone your bank independently.
And I mean, also try and report it if you can, so that we all know. I mean, what happened here is someone put a video about it, which actually has been able to allow us to understand the story a lot better.
Exactly, and especially, as I say, for a change, it's a younger person, because we don't want to write this off to being something that old people fall for, because we can see by that video, absolutely that isn't the case.
Wendy Nola, your consumer ninja, thank you very much indeed. I mean, you've been warned. We've all been warned. We still fall for silly things. We make mistakes. We don't quite understand something. We're often pressured, and isn't that the big thing? We make a decision under pressure. That emotion is really what drives us to do these things. And the people who are trying to scam you, to scam us, they absolutely know that. I mean, you kind of get to a point where you think it's just never safe to actually answer your phone, full stop, finish and clear. And then where will we be? You're at The Money Show, 7:30.
The Money Show.
Shapeshifters.
24 minutes now to 8 the time. Well, some people, very few, have very interesting careers where they're able to work in government, as a regulator, and in the private sector. There are not many of these people, but there are some who've been able to do all of that. Now, Shapeshifter tonight is one of them. Nomviso Bati has been a councillor at ICASA. She's worked at the Film and Publications Board, been a special advisor to a minister, been an acting director general in government, and worked for private companies, including, I should say, Prime Media, the owner of this radio station. Well, Nomviso Bati is now the CEO of the Association of Comms and Technology and has agreed to spend some time with you as our shapeshifter this evening. Nomviso, it's wonderful to talk to you again. Good evening, and thanks for taking the time.
Good evening, Stephen. What a wonderful introduction. I didn't realize I had such a colorful career. I was chuckling to her. Wow. Yes, thank you very much to you and your listeners.
No, well, thank you for coming on. You started studying at the University of Fort Hare. You did a BProc and an LLB. Were you from the Eastern Cape, the area around there?
Yes, I was born from the area that now is named, the strange name, Kukombo. We still cannot pronounce it properly, which is East London, the Montfort, the Buffalo Rivier. I was born in a township called Tanzania there. So I'm born and bred in the Eastern Cape, yes.
And you go to Fort Hare. What were you thinking of doing? I mean, obviously law. Did you have an idea of, arguing in court? Was there something else you were interested in doing?
Oh, no, let me be honest with you. So originally my sights were on roads. I wanted to do journalism. I've always had a thing for journalism because I love writing. So it has always been my strength to write, analytical thinking, long form writing. But unfortunately, there was no money for me to go there. So I go to Fort Hare. The only space they had was a BProc. So I did a BProc and I did a first year LLB. And I was doing a lot of street law. Street law is more advocacy, teaching people about their rights, going to high schools, elderly. So I was very involved in the social aspect of that at university. Then I had a sort of an informal stint at the magistrate court in the township there. I didn't last 2 days. Then I knew this is not my line of work.
Sure.
Just like
sure.
You. Yes, because, and then people think because, you grew up in the township, they think you're exposed to things, but you're not. For instance, being exposed to child rape. I didn't know that. Remember, there was no social media in my days. So it was quite an experience that I was not ready for. And then the Competition Commission then had this opportunity for people to come over. They were reaching out to different universities I'm being honest with you, I didn't know what was the Competition Commission. I had to go physically at the library and read up about it. Then they were doing the first cohort of the graduate trainees at the Competition Commission. And then they say the rest is history. So I got my firm foundation at the competition authorities. Yeah.
I mean, and that's so interesting, and it's such an interesting way into working in South Africa, because you would see different things in different industries. The interesting,
correct.
You talk about journalism and the interest in communications. What was firing that? Because you kind of ended up playing, a huge role in South African journalism in a different way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So because to the point that you made earlier, Stephen, in the Competition Commission, you work with different industries. And then I'll be honest, and I know a lot of young people don't believe this. We just carried cell phones in our days. We had an NEC, if you like, you had a Nokia phone, 3310. And then ICASA, so we dealt with ICASA, and I didn't know who ICASA was. And a lady by the name of, two ladies actually. One is Nadia Bulbulia. She is the CEO of the National Association of Broadcasters right now, right? And a lady by the name of Mandla Simang. She is the CEO of Nozala Investment at this point. They were looking for somebody with competition law to work at ICASA. And I was like, no, I don't know what ICASA does. I just see it on my phone. I don't know. Then they just gave me the legislation to read. Said, no, this is what we do. Can you start up? So I went to ICASA to start a competition law thing, right? I had as a person responsible for competition. So because competition commission, I dealt with tow trucks. I dealt with healthcare. You know how competition commission opens you up to this different world altogether. And I really appreciate this time I spend there. And here's a kicker, and the world works full circle. My mentor at the Competition Commission, I work with her till today. She's a partner at Vertmans, Amor Beggar-Smith. Just think about it, 26 years later. Just think about it, 26 years later, we still click. And I was this impressionable young person from rural Eastern Cape, and she sort of took me under her wing. And till today, me and Amor, it's so strange. We still click.
Sure.
And we're working together on a RICA project for 2 years. She was helping me find a solution. So it's I must say, and I want to say this, especially to people that are not used to our space, that the one comfort that I've had is that because I always want to challenge things, there's always somebody else who's willing to go with me on that journey. So Amor would hold my hand. Even when I was going to ICASA, she was like, look, teach them these things, because the ICT sector does not know these things. So in a way, I was the first person at ICASA to introduce competition law. That's a fact. Yeah.
So, you were working at ICASA and you ended up as a counselor at ICASA. Now, a counselor is, it's more than just being a boss. It's about making actual decisions on policy and on various other things. Was it a very different experience being an employee in the first time you were there and then a counselor the second?
So it was, because the thing that I pride myself that I learned in regulation, I learned this early on, the training that I did, especially when I was at the Competition Commission, is that in order for you to be a regulator, you have to be brave. You have to be somebody who's analytical, and you have to be a finisher. And I loved the last part of being a finisher. So that training, and Competition Commission spent a lot of money on us. We were going to Australia, to the UK. We trained intensively on investigations, analysis, and because we didn't have that kind of work here in South Africa. So by the time I went to ICASA and introduced the work, then I was approached to people, because I've never even thought of being a counselor. Somebody, have you considered being a counselor? Because we see you are able to get things over the line, and you're able to change, you make a mistake, but you're able to reinvent yourself from that mistake that you've made. Okay, how can I make it work for the better of South Africans? And I must say, when I worked as a counselor at ICASA, I had a session beginning of this year, I was telling people that I've made a lot of mistakes, but it's how you recover from those mistakes. And the best mistake that I made at ICASA was on call termination, which is what we now call the cheaper calls on voice calls in South Africa. I made a call and I forgot one part because in there's promotion of administration of justice and act in South Africa, you have to follow each and every step. Yes. And I missed one step. And I will never forget this. And I'm young, I'm very arrogant, I have an ego. I met with the now Justice David Unterhalter. And he says, take me through your thinking process. He's going to represent ICASA. Then I'm like, okay, this is what I've done. And I'm proud of my work. I don't know why these people are taking me to court. And I'm very upset about the whole thing. And then he says, okay, go explain it again. I kid you not. I explained it till 11 p.m. at night. He made me repeat myself. Sure. And then he said, tell me where you made a mistake. He was like an uncle kind of figure. Then I was like, okay. Then he says, if you were to do it now, what would you do it differently? Then I explained, okay, I see I've missed this step and this step. And then he was like, okay, so when you go to court, you have the best interest of South Africans in the decision that you've made, but you've made an error in how you've consulted. So when you go to court, let's ask the court, which was a huge lesson for me, let's ask the court to give you more time to fix the error that you've done.
Sure.
I was like, oh, is that possible? He was like, yeah. So we went to court. Of course, we lost on the not following the process. It was a huge loss. But the court gave us 6 months to finish what we started. I kid you not. I started afresh. And for me, that was a lesson that I said, here's a man, well-renowned, well-respected, but he, of course, we're paying him, but he was so patient with me, my naive self. He was so patient with me, just asking me detailed questions to just say, this is how you arrive at the decision. But I must say, I wouldn't have been successful in my job if I didn't have people that challenged me as well. So, for instance, I worked, so this is how life goes full circle. I've worked with your brother.
I was wondering when he was going to arrive in this process because he was part of that, yes.
Yes, I worked with your brother, Peter Grootes. He was the executive responsible for policy analysis and competition. He's still the greatest in the sector. So I worked with him and, we challenged each other. I wish you could, how I am. You've seen me when I worked at I have very spirited, very energetic. So I worked with him. The beauty of our time when we were at ICASA, we gave each other space to make mistakes. We had the best interest. We believe, maybe we were, but we believe we had the best interest of South Africans at heart. And those decisions that we made at that particular time, they still stand today. Yes. And that's why it wouldn't have been possible without the support of people, especially because he's an economist, I'm a lawyer, and I'm like, okay, I'm like a wannabe economist. So just the financial part of things, for me, that experience was amazing at ICASA up until it wasn't. So, yeah.
Yes. No, I mean, I remember it very, very carefully, but he wouldn't tell me anything, obviously. The difference between working for government, so in a communications ministry, and in a regulator at ICASA, and in the private sector. I mean, to me, they look like 3 different types of thing. Are they that different?
I'll tell you here. So the role of an advisor to the minister, it's more the department will do the work. I must say that. I must put it out. And then your role is to advise the minister to say whether what government department officials are putting before her is in the right order. So the thing that I enjoyed the most about working with the minister, Minister Nhlanhla Nene Abrahams, is that she's a very brave lady. Wherein I say to people, wherein she had this forethought of YR and no one believed her, right? And each and everything for her, she should just think and say, this is what I want to happen. And now we are coming in 2026. I still stuck in a document that she did in 2020. And where we cannot, when I say we cannot move, from a government policy point of view, we're still quoting this document, but we cannot implement it. So the difference is that she was a person that was willing to listen. She was a person that respected other people's opinions, even if they're different. Even if she disagrees with you, she will write you a WhatsApp and say, well, I'm not going to take your view on this one, but I hear you. Right?
Yeah.
She will not ignore you. I could not falter her there. And then private sector for me, that one thing that I need to say this, that people don't realize what hard work radio is. Because I worked at a regulator, I need to be honest on this one. I never knew what it takes. And I worked at the regulator for close to 10 years. I never knew what it took to run a radio station. I didn't know what it took to run a 24-hour operation, what it meant. And I want to tell you practically what it means to have a drive time show from a revenue point of view. Those things excited me. And of course, I'm a person of people's rights. I ruffled a bit of feathers when I was there. But I for me, the practical way of seeing what goes on a radio station, how you prepare. Somebody thinks you're coming on radio for 3 hours. They don't know that you've been preparing the whole day.
Yes.
They're reading newspapers. They're listening to podcasts. They're like, what's current? You have a team of people that assist. You have producers. You have technical. You have a content producer. You have a political. It's a whole machinery. And they still have to make money from advertising. And they still have, you guys have to pay Centec. And for me, I think as a regulator, and I need to be honest, as a regulator, you assume, and I'm being honest because I didn't have the experience, you assume, prime media, it's a bunch of white people, they can make money. It's simple like that. No, I'm being honest. And it's up until then you see that kind of thing. But the part that I enjoyed the most in government, my greatest thing that I'm eternally grateful for, it's a horrible thing to say, is COVID-19.
Sure. I'm going to ask you more about that in just a moment. I'm going to ask you to unpack that for us, please. Nomvuyiso Bati is your shapeshifter this evening. She's with us for another few minutes. It's 8 minutes to 8.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Group and DHL Go Trade. African SMEs are now closer to global markets.
The Money Show.
Shapeshifters.
We're speaking to Nomvuyiso Bati. We're talking about her role in communications. She's currently the CEO of the Association of Comms and Technology and is your shapeshifter this evening. Nomvuyiso, you're about to say the most important thing that happened was actually COVID. Why? Was it a moment to sort of reimagine communications policy?
Yes, but just maybe before I get there. So at some point, Minister then says, I must assist her from being an advisor. I must assist her in terms of merging the two departments because there was an issue of not merging the Department of Communications and Telecommunications. We do that. As she finishes that, I'm then made to act as an interim DG. Then COVID hits.
Yeah.
Right? And I know a lot of people don't remember this about COVID, but in COVID, we couldn't make Zoom calls, right? Our Zoom calls were always dropping and all those things. So I was leading a COVID-19 response team for the telecommunications sector. At the time, remember, we had to give you guys the permits to work from home. I remember, I think you still had Ryan as your interim CEO at the time. He was phoning me. I said, Ryan, you can issue the paper yourself. I'm giving you directive. So for me, the most exciting thing was COVID-19 for South Africa. People don't realize we are able to enjoy video calls today.
Yeah.
We are able to enjoy YouTube today. It took government forever, and I say especially CASA, to agree on spectrum. But that issue of COVID-19 made us move faster in terms of making sure that the licensing happens. So I was running this cool PMO. I was telling people what to do, consulting. It was the coolest time. I actually said we grew so much as a country during COVID-19. We even did a lessons learned report that each and every person, when I say person, industry players, be it broadcasters, be it telecommunications, be it fiber, like tower operators. And I know at some point some even real estate agent wanted to join our PMO because we're the most fastest acting PMO. And we're like, no, they wanted us to approve drones. We're like, no, we're not into aviation. Don't do drones. For me, and when I left government with a heart that said, wow, what an experience. Because I never thought I would work for government, because I only worked there for 3 years. Then I worked at the FPB. Let me reserve my comments there.
Okay.
No, it's just that I don't know how to explain it.
No, sure.
What a great organization. A lot can be done. A lot can be done there. But I think we're still stuck in old ways of thinking. That's all I'm going to say.
Sure. We've got a minute left. I do need to ask you what you do for fun. I don't know. I mean, we always say in the sector, people are not allowed to just say their job because everybody says that, or spend time with their family. Everybody wants to do that. What do you do for fun? I mean, when you get a chance, if you don't have to work for 2 weeks, where do you go? Where do you do? Where do you go?
So currently, as I'm telling you, the best place to go to in South Africa is the Midlands. So my best thing that I do, I swim. People find it the funniest thing. I learned how to swim 2 years ago, and it's time for my brain to just take a break.
Yes.
Right? And then I love the mountains of the Midlands. I know everyone likes the beach. I don't do outdoor swimming. I do it, let's say, in rivers and that kind of thing. I don't do beach because the salt. I don't like the salt, but I love mountains. I love, especially these ones, because it's cold, there's the snow, and I love the Midlands. I just wanted to say it's the most beautiful part of South Africa, and I get to switch off. And that's what I do for fun. And I'm a mother to 2 young men. One is 15, one is 18. So I'm a boy mom. So every other activity that I get to do for fun involves them. So I laugh and I don't laugh, Stephen. If we're in Gauteng, we're going to come to and watch rugby so we watch a lot of rugby. We go to Loftus.
Eastern Cape,
we don't support. Yeah, yes. You knew it. Yes, it's an Eastern Cape thing. My children are so much into rugby. Yes, it's an Eastern Cape thing. I'm so sorry to the football fans. I don't know much about football. So, yes,
thank you. We unfortunately are out of time, but I would have loved to continue talking to you. There's so much to talk about. I really enjoyed your views, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us and give us some really interesting insights into your career. It really has been fascinating. So Nomvuyiso, thank you for being our shapeshifter this evening. Nomvuyiso Bati, the CEO of the Association of Comms and Technology, but as you can hear, has done all sorts of things. Next time you make a phone call, a cell phone call, just know that one of the reasons it's cheaper than it used to be is because of things she did. Because of her, she was your shapeshifter this evening.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Group and DHL Go Trade. African SMEs are now closer to global markets.
Well, in the US, things still positive. The Dow Jones up 0.21%, the Nasdaq up 0.15%, the S&P 500 is up 0.28% at the moment. Lots to come tonight. Aubrey is up next. I'll see you tomorrow. Good evening. It's 8 o'clock.